Your website's font is making the first impression before a word is read. And if you're still doing font family Arial, we need to talk. In the next few minutes, we're going to learn everything about CSS fonts, how they work, how to load any Google font in only 2 lines, and why a font might silently be breaking on some devices. We have talked about CSS fonts previously, but in this video we are going to dive much deeper and understand everything you will have to know in your entire web development career. Stick with me and let's get started. Here we have two paragraph elements and both of them look different. In fact, this one looks bigger than this one, even though we're using the exact same font size on both of them. And of course, neither of them is bold. So what's the difference? Let's go back, look at our code, and we have used this ID selector to add that font family to this paragraph tag. And here we have used a property which we have seen before called font family. So what is this property and what is all this? Well, in CSS, font family defines a list of fonts that we're going to try and apply on our website. In this list, CSS is going to read the first font, which is Inter. And Inter is a pretty modern font, and most probably we are going to find it on all the computers that we are going to reach. However, let's consider that Inter font is not available. And what is meant by fonts not being available? Well, it's not installed on user's computer. On your computer, if you search for fonts, you will find this folder. Depending upon whether you're on Windows, on a Mac, or on a Linux, you're going to find a folder. Within that folder, you're going to find all the fonts that we have available. And if I search for, let it load first, and here if I search for Inter, this is going to give us all the fonts that falls under Inter family. But let's consider that Inter is not available. Well, it's going to go with this one, and if this one is also not available, I am going to very quickly go through my fonts and check if this one is available. Let's search for this and this one isn't available. Therefore, it's going to fall back to Arial. And let's say that CSS finds the Arial font and therefore it's going to stop and will never try the sans serif font because it's not needed. Now, here's something more interesting. The font that we define here is not just a single font, it could be an entire family. By sans serif, we mean any font that meets this sans serif group. Similarly, by Arial, there's any font which meets the Arial group. And if I do something like, let's say, make it INTE, now this font isn't going to be found and it falls back all the way to sans serif. Or I believe it fell to this one. Um, let's break this one too. And finally, I am going to break this one, save again, and it's back to the default font that the browser has provided. So here's why it matters. Let's consider that I remove both of these fonts, save and go back, and now we are back to the same font that we started with. This is because neither Inter nor Helvetica is available on my computer, and therefore we're using a font which is provided by the browser by default. And obviously it doesn't look nice because we wanted it to look something like this, and we're getting something completely different. Therefore, what I need to do is to define the group that I want at the end of my fonts So I am always going to get a font which is similar to my main font. And sans serif family here is similar to my main font. Just to just for information purposes, there are four different families. We have serif, we have sans serif, we have cursive, and we have monospace. If I switch to monospace, for example, let's do font family monospace. This is going to give us text with exact spacing between each letter, regardless of which letter is that. In other words, here I is taking much less space than M, but in a monospace font, every letter is going to take the same space. Similarly, we have cursive fonts which are kind of stylish, looking like handwriting, and this is what we get. And finally, we have serif, which we generally get by default, and this is what it looks like. So just to rephrase, you need to define the family that you need at the end of your fonts. So even if a font is missed in the middle, you're always going to get a font similar to your required one. And obviously that might raise a question. What if you want the exact font that you have picked on all the devices you can find? What if we want the exact same font to be used no matter which browser we're using? Well, we can load up font using our own server, or we can use Google Fonts. So let's go to Google Fonts website and let's see how to use a font through Google Fonts. I am going to search for Google Fonts, open the first website that comes up, and here we are going to find thousands of fonts that we can select from, and I'm going to select one of them and show you how to use it right away. So let's move forward and let's pick something which is slightly different. Let's say that we have a retro style website and we want to use a similar font, and there we go. We can preview the font in many different styles, and once you feel that the font is fit for your site, you can just go ahead and click get font. This is going to give you two buttons here, download and get embed code. We need to go with get embed code. I am going to click here, and this gives us a lot of code. So first of all, we need to copy this code. It gives us three different link tags and we need to copy all of them, and we're going to put them in the head tag of our website. So I'm going to put all of them here. I can actually remove these two, but this one is more important. So for simplicity, I'm going to remove these two and only keep this one. Let's save it, go back, and there's no difference at all. That's because we need to define this font. So to define or to attach it to your text, you need to look here, and within that CSS class, you need to look for the font family property. We are going to copy this line, and after copying it, we are going to place that into our rule. And now that I save, let's go back, and our font is successfully changed to the font that we selected. Let's increase the font size a bit. I am going to increase that all the way to 64 pixel. And as you can see, we have successfully used a font from Google Fonts. So to recap, all we need to do is to click get font. After that, we're going to click get embed code. Here we are going to copy this last line into our head tag. Next, we are going to copy this line onto any CSS tool, and our font will be applied automatically. And we would have a beautiful font in a website which is going to work similar in every single web page without us having to install it for every client. But what if the font that you wish to use isn't available on Google Fonts and it's certainly not available on user's computer? Or more likely, the client that you're working for doesn't allow the use of Google Fonts for privacy purposes. Just like Google Fonts, we can host a font for ourselves. So to do that, for now I am going to go with Google Fonts still, but you can go to any website that provides font for downloads and download it. So let's select any font. I shall go with this one. I am going to click get font, and here both of our fonts are added to a bucket. We need to remove one of them and we're going to keep this one only. Click it and click get font once more. Next we're going to click get embed code, and this is going to give us the exact code that we can use to add it to our website. But we don't want to get this font from Google Fonts. Instead, we want to host it for ourselves. Therefore, I am going to click download. Immediately it's downloaded. I am going to open it and copy paste it into a folder, and let's extract it first. I can just right click and extract it using WinRAR or whichever zip facility you have available. Let's delete that. I am going to create a new folder, name that fonts, and from that font there are several different types of fonts that are available, and I don't want all of them. For now I am just going to pick one of them called bitcount redouble regular.ttf. So let's pick this one. I'm just going to cut and paste it. I'm also going to rename that to bitcount for easier usage. Let's name that bitcount, and there we go. Now that we have a font, we need to define it within our CSS first. So I'm going to remove this Google Fonts API, save, go back, and the font is gone. And here I'm going to define my bit count or my custom font, which I'm hosting for myself. So to do that, I need to define something called a font face. And there are two things that I need to define. I'm going to remove that and type it from scratch. What we need to do is to define a font dash face, curly brackets. Within it, we're going to define two things called a font family and SRC. Font family is the name that we're going to use when accessing a font, which we can define as, let's say, bit count. And next I'm going to tell the CSS where to get the font from. So I just said URL slash fonts slash bit count, and here I need to define how to parse my font. So I'm going to say format TTF. So let me go through it once more. First of all, I define the name of my font, which is bit count. Next, I define its source, where to pick it from. Since it's inside fonts bit count folder, I just use fonts slash bitcount.ttf, and then I defined its format, which is TTF. And there are three common formats that you can see, which would be TTF, WOW, and WOW2. For now we have a TTF, so we are going to use that. And here I am going to remove the current font and define bit count in its place. Let's save, go back, and a font isn't applied yet because actually I made a mistake in my format. I need to define not TTF but true type. Let's save and go back, and now my font is successfully applied. So let's recap. It might seem a bit complex, but actually it's pretty simple once you practice it a bunch of times. We are going to download a font and place it within any folder that we like. We are then going to define a font face. define its name, and then define its source. The name can be anything. Maybe we can name it something like bit count double, save, and now a font isn't applied because even though we have specified it here correctly, we have used the wrong name here. So I am going to add quotes and then add bit count. Sorry, not those quotes. Bit dash. Oh, sorry. We need to do bit dash double. And now that I go back, our font is applied again. So that's it for loading Google Fonts and loading our own fonts. Now before we wrap up this video, I am going to give you some advice on selecting fonts. Like I said, there are four common font families, namely serif, sans serif, monospace, and cursive. And the simplest idea that you can always stick with is to never use cursive. And that's because unless you're designing a website for maybe a toy shop or maybe for an artist website, you likely would need to stay professional and not use a font that no one could read. So you're always going to either use serif, sans serif, or monospace. And monospace, let's search for monospace to show you a few examples, is generally not nice. It's only useful when you are defining code or something like this, which looks nicer when everything is monospaced or exactly spaced. At the simplest, you can use monospace when you need to write code. And just for reference, code in VS Code is monospaced. And if I show you an example, let's type something like A B C D E F G H I J K L M N O P Q R S T U V W X Y Z. I'm just going to type all the characters like this, and then just type a sensible sentence like I am going to take exactly, and let's stop here. And you can see that 26 characters took exactly the same space as this line, and similarly M took exactly the same space as an empty space, and we know that this is a monospace. We're using a monospace font here by default because code looks nicer with monospace. I'm not going to dive deeper into why is that. Next we have serif. So let's search for serif. There we go. And serif is basically a kind of playful. You can use it when you're maybe designing a children website, maybe you're designing a school site, maybe you're designing an artist website, maybe you're designing a photo gallery. All of them work well with serif because it looks kind of playful. And it looks playful because of those little little dashes that we have here. All those rounded corners give it a playful feel, which is really important when you are making a website for kids maybe. Let's go to serif now. So let's search for serif, and I'm going to open this one, and I actually made a mistake here. Serif fonts are more playful because of those little strokes with each letter, while sans serif is more professional. So you're going to use serif when you want to get a playful feel, and with sans you're going to get something very professional and serious looking, which is nice for business websites. So to recap, never use cursive unless you know exactly what are you going for. Use monospace for code and code only, nothing else. Use serif for light, playful and casual feel, and use sans serif when you want a professional and business-like feel. And just by using these tools, you can ensure that your website always looks up to date and professional.